Robert.
And we are
We're
live.
live.
Hello, Erica. Good evening.
Hello, Robert. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. My outrage of the day.
Oh,
So,
let me hear.
so Michelle Obama cannot sleep at night. Did you know that? Because Trump is
Why?
keeping her. Well, because Trump is keeping her up. Now we
Oh,
could read a whole lot
oh.
into that. I don't want to go there, but the real reason that Trump is keeping her up is because all these. Sorry, all these poor people. See, you needed that. See, you need to
I'm
know.
sorry. I was
I
not
don't need you.
expecting that. It just got me by surprise. Uh,
Right. So,
anyway, okay.
on a serious note, she's losing sleep over all these people being deported, without due process and all of that. And the thing that I'm just outraged by, I mean, she could used to lose a little sleep. I'm not worried about it. Obama deports what, 3 million, 4 million. Trump's
Yeah,
deported 30,000 or 50,000 or whatever the
yeah.
number is. But here's the real issue: these people got into the country without due process. So now you're worried that they're being deported without due process. Where
Yes.
was your concern when they were coming in? But
They
hey, it's just
their concern was making sure they were padding their voting base. Come on, let's be real. They don't care. They do not care about these people. It's a joke. They were fine with Obama deporting everybody because he was Black Jesus. And now we have Orange Man Bad doing it. So therefore, ergo, now you're a bigot if you want a border. Okay? It's this is what we're doing. Ladies and
yeah,
gentlemen, I am on it today. You are in
yeah.
for it. Okay?
Too much Red Bull. Let's roll it and go to the monologue while we still can.
Before it is too late. Okay, ready? Here we
Exactly.
go.
Hello, and welcome to Of the People, the false equivalence between Russia and Hamas. For some reason, people now are making this moral equivalence between Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Hamas's massacre of all the Israeli citizens. And honestly, that's not only wrong, it's a moral obscenity. Because look, Russia's attack on Ukraine is an illegal war of aggression, to be sure. It violates the UN Charter. It obviously tramples on Ukraine's sovereignty. And it shows Russia to be what Russia has always been, which is an imperialist power. But however unlawful, it is still a traditional war. It's state versus state where they're fighting over territory, politics, and they're fighting over influence. Not so with Hamas. Hamas's attack on Israel is something far worse. It's not war, it's not even resistance. Frankly, it's pure, unvarnished evil. It is a deliberate massacre on October 7th of women, children, the elderly, the innocent. They filmed it, they celebrated it, they broadcast it around the world. Comparing Russia's tanks rolling into the Ukraine to Hamas's butchery at the Nova Music Festival is like comparing the Wehrmacht to the Nazis' Einsatzgruppen. And for those who don't know what that is, the Wehrmacht was the army military fighting military, and the Einsatzgruppen was the paramilitary. One fights soldiers against soldiers wrongfully, illegally, I get it, but the other was used after the army left to hunt down civilians and to exterminate them like animals. Sound familiar? Because that's what Hamas did on October 7th. And too many people are still excusing it with their so-called, well, it depends on the context. No, it doesn't. This is the worst kind of moral relativism. And honestly, it's cowardly. Russia's invasion is a betrayal of political order. Hamas's slaughter is a betrayal of civilization itself. And Russia, for all its crimes, still talks about diplomacy and treaties and borders, albeit cynically, I get it. But Hamas doesn't want diplomacy. Hamas doesn't want compromise. Hamas wants blood. Hamas wants death, and they want the annihilation of an entire people. That's the Jews. And under international law, even the most brutal wars allow soldier against soldier combatant, but never under any circumstances the intentional slaughter of civilians. Hamas's actions are not protected by law. They are not excused by grievance. They're not justified by history. Russia's crime is a crime against political order. Hamas's crimes are a crime against humanity. There is no equivalence. There is no gray area. And anyone who refuses to see the difference is not neutral. They're complicit. And that's the difference between Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Hamas's massacre of Israelis that started on October 7th and Israel's right to protect itself. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the monologue. Ericka, let's bring us back in.
Yes.
And I want to jump into this because we are really pleased to have back with us the president and founder of the Foundation for Defense of Democracy, an old DC insider and one of the smartest guys in town, Cliff May. And let's see, Cliff, thank you for being back with us on
Welcome.
Of the People. Your background is you were a journalist. You've traveled the world. You have this, you say bipartisan, I would say nonpartisan think tank. It's one of the most established and frankly go-to sources in DC, right? So I want to jump right in, and I want to get back to the Ukraine-Hamas differential in all of that. But before we get there, when you and I last spoke, it was before the election. We're now literally tonight, April 29th, is 100 days of Trump. High level, what changes have you seen, the good and the bad?
Well, look, we have seen a tremendously energetic administration, and God bless him, President Trump has the energy of a 20-year-old or more. It's really startling. He's just on all the time, and the flurry of issues and executive orders and decisions. Do I approve of them all? No. Do I approve of some? Yes. Some have been successful. Some have not. Doesn't mean they won't be successful. I was getting calls today from some journalists saying, well, can you give him a mark for the first 100 days? Make believe you're a teacher. I said, I'll give him a mark, but understand it's not the end of the semester yet. So there'll still be midterms and term papers, and we can still revise the marks as we go forward. Look, in particular, as you say, the negotiations over Ukraine, Russia have not gone well so far. Doesn't mean they can't. I was somewhat encouraged over the last few days. Why? Because it seemed to me that President Trump was revising his view of Putin. He told Putin to stop after Putin went ahead and hit with more than 200 drones and missiles Kyiv, hitting residential buildings, very bad. Trump said stop. And then later, that was on a Thursday. Then on Friday, Putin once again hit a residential apartment building in another city. And Trump said, well, maybe he's tapping me along. I'm not sure I knew that phrase, but I understand what it means. In other words, playing me. And he said, maybe I should be thinking about secondary sanctions. Secondary sanctions would be more economic pressure by a lot than Putin has been under. And the day after that, Lindsey Graham posted that, okay, that's a good idea, and I've got 60 co-sponsors for a serious secondary sanctions bill. Let's do it. And if Trump would do that, and I would argue also increase munitions to the Ukrainians, in particular Patriot missiles, which is how you knock offensive missiles out of the sky before they reach their intended victims, but also ATACMS, which is a way to reduce or diminish Russian military capability. And I would say, who should pay for that? The Europeans can pay for that very well with their own funds, or about $300 billion in frozen Russian funds they can utilize for that purpose. Or I'm sure Zelensky would say, fine, lend me. Let's do a lend-lease, and I'll use my mineral wealth as collateral. You got it. Either way, if you would do what I've just said, Putin would feel some pressure. And it's only if Putin feels that pressure that he will compromise, because so far he has not compromised at all. Let me just say one more thing, Rob, but it gets back to your monologue. And I think your monologue is quite right. What is Putin trying to do? He is trying to subjugate the Ukrainians. And if he succeeds in that, what will he do? I think he will place bayonets to the backs of Ukrainian soldiers and tell them they will march west. And I think our European
Why?
friends understand.
Why?
What's that?
Why will they march west?
March west to Moldova, which is not part of NATO, and then march west to other parts of the former Russian Empire, which for a while was rebranded as the Soviet Empire. What does that include? It includes Estonia, it includes Latvia, it includes Lithuania, it includes Poland, it includes Finland, and I can go on. Anything that was a Soviet possession or even a Soviet satellite was, in Putin's mind, part of the Russian Empire, and he wants it back.
Yep.
And by the way, the best soldiers he could find, indeed, are Ukrainian soldiers, because they know how to fight the way a lot of West Europeans have no experience in, and he would use them. And I can tell you other things I think he would do, but I won't unless you ask or know how far you want to go on. But I do want to make this other point. While Putin wants to subjugate the Ukrainians, while Xi Jinping wants to subjugate the Taiwanese, while Kim Jong-un wants to subjugate the South Koreans, what does Hamas and the Islamic Republic of Iran want to do? They don't want to subjugate the Israelis. They want to exterminate the Israelis.
Yeah.
That's called genocide. And that's why the Israelis are being accused of genocide, because that's what you do. It's clever communications. You simply accuse the other side of doing what you're doing. The Russians do. That's old KGB style disinformation. That's how you play the game. And that game is going on right now. And so I think you're also right. Israel has to defend itself, and it is defending itself by saying, at the end of this war, Hamas will have no military capabilities, no governing capabilities. It will be essentially destroyed. Not that there still won't be Hamas, not that there still won't be people who are genocidal. We're still Nazis, after all, in the world, in America and Europe. But if they don't have their hands on weapons, they're not terribly dangerous, as long as that's the case. And that's what the Israelis were aiming for now.
Yeah, I don't mind if Hamas continues to exist as long as they're neutered. It's a pretty simple thing. But before we go back to the Middle East, I want to stay with Russia and Ukraine, because it's always been my belief. And look, I go back to the height of the Cold War. I went to school in Montreal. I lived next to the Soviet embassy when I was in downtown Montreal at the height of the cruise missiles and things like that, when we were just still discussing flexible response and those kinds of things. It has always been my position that after the breakup of the Soviet Union, that this paranoia in Russia and wanting to rebuild, maybe not in name, but certainly in geography, the old Soviet Empire, if for no other reason than they're scared of fighting one day a two-front war, right? There was always that issue of fighting China in the East and fighting Europe and America in the West. So where am I wrong on this? Because I think, where am I wrong? And then number two is, where does this, if there is a peace, where does this end? Because I don't see any way they get Crimea back.
Okay, so both good questions. Let's unpack them. One, look, you were smarter than me in seeing that after the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia would not evolve into, say Poland, which I kind of thought it would. When FDD was founded, just after the attacks of 9/11, early 2002, I thought, okay, we've got a serious problem that people don't want to recognize with Islamists, with jihadists, non-state actors also. The Islamic Republic of Iran, which is clearly jihadist. And I knew that in part because as I was a reporter there in 1979, and I wasn't fooled by Khomeini like so many people were. I saw the problem that was unfolding there. Let me just say it that way. I can talk more if you want. But I didn't think Russia was going to be a problem post-Soviet. And I didn't think China would be a problem. Hey, 2001, what happened? China was given most favored nation status by the U.S., brought into WTO. The prevailing theory was, I think on both sides of the aisle, they're going to get wealthier thanks to us. Wealthier nations become more moderate. They're going to like the world order that we lead because it's helping them. It's all going to be fine. That's not the way it has worked out, as you know. But here's what I don't think. It's not, and here's where I disagree with you. Putin is not worried that he's going to be attacked by Poland or Lithuania or he's not worried about any of that. He'd never thought. He's smart enough to know NATO is purely defensive and barely that, especially over recent years when countries like Germany are spending, maybe 1% of their GDP on defense, and most of that goes for pensions anyway. He knew that. What's the story here? The story is this: Putin sees himself as the Tsar. And it is his mission, his responsibility as Tsar, to restore the Russian Empire, which has been fractured terribly. Keep in mind, the Russian Empire was only rebranded as the Soviet Union. It actually expanded under that rebranding. That was wonderful. That's why, not because it's a communist, that's why he says the greatest catastrophe, the greatest disaster of the 20th century was the fall of the Soviet Union, because it's the fall of the Russian Empire. So he's got to restore it. And to restore the Russian Empire, that means to recover its possessions. And there's none more important than Ukraine, because to be the Tsar means you are, by definition, the Tsar of all the Russias. Now, all the Russias implies Russia proper. It implies Belarus, White Russia, which is a vassal state. He's happy with that for now. But it also implies Ukraine. Why? Because the Ukraine, the word means like frontier or outlands, that sort of thing. It is where, it is in a way where the Russian spirit first evolved. Before there was a Moscow, there was Kiev Rus. There was Kiev. It's an older city. He needs that back, and he wants that back. That's not the end of his ambitions, but it's very vital. And he could not stand to see the Ukrainians, as they were, voting, having political parties, wanting to be in the European Union, wanting to be in NATO, wanting to be essentially wanting to be part of the free world. He couldn't stand to see that and thought it's a bad example for the rest of the Russians. I was an official election observer in Ukraine for their last elections. Very clear to me, people were so proud. They have political parties. They have freedom of speech. They have freedom of the press. And look how we're conducting an election. We're doing it right. It's not a faked election. It's not a fraud. We're doing this correctly because we care about this, and we want to be part of the free world led by America. And Putin couldn't stand that.
And speaking of the free world and, socialism not being a part of it, let's take a quick minute to hear from our sponsor, American Center for Education and Knowledge, on the dangers of socialism. You guys stay with us. We've got Mr. Cliff May with us from the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. So come, hang out, you guys. Stay with us come back for more after the break.
Socialism. The goal of socialism is communism. The world is quite familiar with socialism and the horrors socialism has brought with it. It wasn't that long ago. Actually, it's still with us. Socialism creeps into government slowly until it's too late. Socialism, the big lie. Yes, it could happen anywhere. This educational video was brought to you by the American Center for Education and Knowledge and paid for by people like you who care about the future of our democracy. Please help us continue our work educating the American public and consider supporting ASIC by making a tax-deductible donation at asicfund.org.
Yes, and you guys, you're going to want to go to asicfund.org, asicfund.org to make your tax-deductible donation and to get some merch, to get some ASIC merch. You got cups. Don't you have one of the cups? Yep, we got the IAD, the Israel Appreciation Day merch.
You mean like that one?
You got the ASIC mug. This is not our sponsor, but if you want to go to Generally Irritable and get your reasons to trust the government mug, you can do that too.
Okay, which are good. And so,
all right, we got Cliff back with us here.
Is he back? So back joining us.
When to get a little.
Hey, go for it. Hey, I'll trade you mugs.
Okay.
So back with us, President and founder Cliff May, Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and really, folks, one of the go-to think tanks in DC. It is the place, right? And it's bipartisan, I would say nonpartisan, and it is really one of the established think tanks in DC, which is why we're thrilled to have you with us. I want to jump to China, however, and the whole tariff war.
Wait,
with
you
China.
you have to say it right. You have to say it right. China. You want to talk about China.
So this is like Texas versus New Jersey. we say China. Okay.
China.
And don't start a fight with me, Ericka. You can't finish. But just saying. So the whole tariff war with China. My argument has been for a long time that China, even after entering into the WTO and most favored nation status, as you brought up, has really been an aggressor, both overtly and covertly, whether it's economically, militarily, certainly the Belt and Road Initiative and those things. And I believe China has been, in one form or another, vying for, I would say, hegemony in my language, over the United States. And now we have this tariff war. They are, what, 2/3 our size. They are a surplus economy. We are a deficit economy, right? Because, I mean, we buy, what, 4 times more than they buy from us, 5 times more than they buy from us. So how does this tariff war play itself out in the long run with China? And is it really a good tool to use to try to engage China in this battle? Because it's really a tug of war for hegemony, in my opinion.
Well, a couple of things. One is, yes, China wants hegemony, and we should just make clear what we mean by that. They want to be the superpower in Asia for sure, but well beyond Asia, they want to be the superpower. They're all over Africa now. I was with somebody today who just came back from Africa and was kind of shocked to see how much China, how strong the Chinese presence is. And it's Chinese imperialism / colonialism, because they want the resources, the natural resources, and they want to take them back, and they'll pay off who they have to pay off. And they want to be, and they're also all over Latin America. In the first Trump administration, a guy I know fairly well was the head of the Inter-American Development Bank, and his mission was to stop Chinese influence in Latin America. And he was fired by Biden on the first day in office. He's back in an influential position, I'm glad to say, because he sees this. So here's what we should understand about China, and I think we do. And I want to give credit largely due to somebody named Matt Pottinger, this brilliant guy. He's chairs, among other things, not all he does, chairs our Asia program at FDD. He was in the National Security Council. He was deputy national security advisor under H.R. McMaster. He's somebody who speaks fluent Mandarin, has given speeches in Mandarin. And what he's essentially did for a long time was sort of scrape through Xi Jinping's speeches and articles. Don't forget, in China, you've got 1 billion people. You've got like 100 million members of the Communist Party. He's got to communicate with them. He's got to tell them what he wants to do. So there is a place where he's telling the truth. You just got to find it in Mandarin and understand what it is he's telling them. That's what Matt Pottinger did. And what he found out is, there's no question about it, Xi Jinping doesn't want to be our friend. He wants to displace the U.S. as the preeminent power in the world. He wants a new world order that China leads. And to that end, he has made, I would call it an axis. We do call it an axis with the following junior partners. One is obviously Vladimir Putin. Another is obviously Ali Khamenei in Iran. Another is Kim Jong-un in North Korea. Now think about it. You got a communist regime, you got an Islamist regime, you got a neo-imperialist regime, you got a dynasty. What do they all have in common? They all want to diminish American power, and they all are working towards that end with the idea of a new world order where they will make the rules. It'll be distinctly illiberal. They'll do what they want to do. Even the Houthis, part of what they're trying to do, and they're doing it with a lot of help from the Islamic Republic of Iran, but some help also from the Chinese, as we now know. What are they trying to do? They're trying to say there are no rules in the world if we want to break them. Freedom of the seas is one of the oldest of international laws. The United States had claimed that we're the ones who guarantee it. Nobody else can. We're going to prove that they can't even guarantee that. They don't make the rules. They don't enforce the rules. We make the rules. We enforce the rules. That's also partly why China has taken over so much of the UN. as has the Islamic Republic of Iran and others. We're spending billions of dollars on the United Nations and almost all its organizations, not all, but most of them are viciously and vehemently anti-American. So then the question comes, what do we do about China? It's not so easy. I told you before, I'm going to be honest. I don't know if tariffs does the trick. I honestly don't know. I don't think that we can entirely disengage from China economically. We were just too interlocked. What we can do, and what should be the priority, is we want no strategic supply chains going to China. We don't want to depend on them for pharmaceuticals. We don't want their software or hardware in our weapons systems, which they have been. We don't want them in our harbors.
What?
We don't want them in our communication systems.
We have put Chinese software in our defense. Oh my God, I can't.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
We have experts on this at FDD, and we have a cyber center where they found exactly this. So hardware and software. So this is the kind of. So there are certain things that we have to prioritize. And there again, anything strategic to be prioritized. If people want to buy their sneakers, if people want to buy their t-shirts, if people want to buy their flip-flops from China, I don't mind. That's fine. Do that. I don't think Americans want to make that stuff anyhow. That's fine. But let's concentrate on where they can get into our systems or cut us off during a conflict.
And so, it's also, go ahead, Ericka.
Well, I just, listening to you talk about, this sort of unholy alliance, this, a Muslim country, a Hindu country, whatever.
Communist, not Hindu.
Sorry, what did I say?
Hindus on our side.
Yeah, that's not what I meant. Sorry, my bad. But you get what my point is. These very different countries with very different religions, ideals, etc. I feel like, just like the left wing alliance is falling apart because you can't be queers for Palestine, like that's an oxymoron, you know what I mean? Like, won't this other kind of alliance fall apart at some point when those countries also have very fundamentally different values?
It'll fall apart after they defeat us, but not before.
That's the key phrase. At some point is the key phrase. So, for example, does Putin have to worry about China in the long run? Yes, in the long run, for sure. Why? Because China has a lot of people and not a lot of resources, and Russia has a lot of resources and not a lot of people in what we call the Russian
continent. Yeah, they can take their stuff.
Keep in mind, Russia has always been an empire, not a nation state. It's an empire that has expanded not by boats or ships on the sea like the British or like the Portuguese. It has expanded over land. Chechnya is a colony of Russia. It's not Russian. It's a colony. And if you go all the way to the Sea of Japan, what's the major Russian city over there? Vladivostok. What does Vladivostok mean? Vladivostok, conqueror of the East. At some point, a Chinese leader will look north to Vladivostok and say, no, the Russians shouldn't be conquering the East. The East is ours. But that's coming. That's a long way off. It's probably not in your lifetime or mine.
Well, on the other hand,
like Robert said, after they've already defeated us.
Look, it's no difference. The only thing that holds the Sunni and the Shia together are their hate for Israel. If there was no Israel, which would make them both happy, they would then start attacking each other over time because they don't get along either, right?
The Sunni-Shia split is 1,400 years old. They have been fighting for 1,400 years. There's been no negotiation to stop that. To the extent there is any comity between Sunni and Shia, it is, as you say, over Israel. Although, to be absolutely fair, the Saudis, and I would not have said this in 2001 or 2002, and the Saudis, I don't think at this point to see any value in destroying Israel. The Saudi leader, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, not Khalid Sheikh, Mohammed bin Salman, MBS.
Bin Salman.
Mohammed bin Salman is eager for stability because he has a vision of his country in 50 years being a very different place than it is now, and he is not interested in fighting wars or fighting the Jews. In fact, if he's going to have a high-tech country, he knows he has to have good relations with the Israelis. I could be wrong, but I am convinced. I've been to my amazement, I have been to Saudi Arabia on a number of occasions. They're not interested in destroying Israel. They don't see how that benefits them. The United Arab Emirates don't want to do that either. The Qataris do. The Qataris.
I was going to bring you to the Qataris in a second.
Okay,
but
so
look, my comment, not to interrupt you, my comment is not really about leadership or government. It's about the people, the Sunni, the rank and file, right? And that's one of the things that the Saudis are worried about. And then we can talk about the Muslim Brotherhood, right? I mean, there's other.
The Muslim Brotherhood wants to destroy Israel, no question about that.
Right. But my point, going back to Ericka's point, is right. Realpolitik, the old German concept, right? Capital R, small K, an enemy of my enemy is my friend. Right. So that's what I think holds everyone together. But I want to come back to this tariff just for a couple minutes, because then I want to segue, to Iran and also the middle Israel and what happens with Gaza. I mean, we'll make Gaza an international destination. But to me, the question of the tariffs are the following, right? The tariffs are not solely just a standalone weapon, but it is a weapon in a war. And all the places you say China is, they're also in the Bahamas, right? They're also really, they're a friend of mine used to be the ambassador to the Bahamas. And even back then during the Bush 43 years, they were making inroads there. But my question is, can China sustain this fight? Because on tariffs alone, not that tariffs by themselves will do the trick, right? But their economy is 2/3 the size. They are an export economy. They lose 10 million jobs in this tariff war, which is the projections that I've seen. Economically, Xi Jinping has a problem internally. The question is, how sustainable is it? And I'm not sure that Trump is looking to defeat China based on tariffs alone. But it's sort of, to me, and that's why I want your opinion, it's a shot across the bow, because when you look at it, the issue of, do they go into Taiwan? Their Navy is clearly bigger than ours at this point, whether it's, the whole free seas argument. We're fighting with them in the Panama Canal, right? We're fighting. I mean, everywhere you look, there are points of contention, not the least of which is how much does China land and Smithfield Foods and other companies in the U.S. do they already own, right? And proximities to bases and all that. So tariffs. Aren't tariffs a good cudgel, I guess, is the question. Not by themselves and not forever.
I think I guess I have to say it remains to be seen. President Trump has been saying they're going to come to us and they're going to say, let's figure out a better deal on trade and on all this, and maybe they will. Right now, the Chinese are saying, no, you want to fight? We'll fight. I can do that. Don't forget, Xi Jinping doesn't have to worry about elections in 2 years. He doesn't have to worry about elections at all. I'm not good enough to be able to tell you how Xi Jinping reacts to all this.
No, I understand. I've always seen China as, I took a course a million years ago in McGill, and the People's Republic was always sort of the sleeping giant in all of this. And when they've modernized and, forget about, Mao and the Cultural Revolution, but from Deng Xiaoping forward, right? I mean, it's been sort of China's entree into the world. And yet I think they have always had this long range plan. I mean, they think in millennium. They don't think in 4 or 8 year cycles.
Sure.
Right. I remember I had an old martial arts instructor from Japan who, he said to us one day after working out, he said, you guys just celebrated your bicentennial. We said, yes, Sensei. He said, we have swords that are older than your country. Right. So, I mean, it's a difference of perspective. But let me jump from China. I want to jump to Iran, because I know we talked last time you were on the show. And again, for people who weren't there, it was in October, it was before Trump. How has Iran's global threat changed since Trump took office?
Well, its threat is much reduced, but the main reason for that is what the Israelis have done. The Israelis, and I was in Israel not too long ago. They're still fighting a 7-front war. They're winning on all 7 fronts, which is the good news. The bad news is that Iran is still on the verge of having nuclear weapons, which could make all the other battles for nothing. But if you think about, say, 2015, which is when Obama went into, concluded the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was neither comprehensive nor a plan of action. He could say, look, we can't be fighting with the Iranians. They've got Hezbollah. Hezbollah's got 150,000 missiles pointing at Israel. They'll all be, launched. It's too hard. They have a colony, and it's a dangerous one with chemical weapons called Syria at this point. Assad is totally their guy. Now what the Israelis have done is they've obviously decimated Hamas. That's still going on. They have amazingly done tremendous damage to Hezbollah. I mean, the idea that Hezbollah's missiles, like 80%, 90% have been destroyed. Their leadership has been killed. The fact, and this is related to what happened to Hezbollah, that Assad has fallen in Syria. It's not that it's a good government there, but it's not such a dangerous government. And the fact that the Israelis, after being struck by like 300 drones and missiles from Iranian soil, went back in and did what a lot of people thought was not possible to do, which is knock out the Iranian missile and air defense system, which had been supplied by, guess who? The Russians, right?
Which is what you predicted in October, by the way, to give you a little bit of credit. We have the clip. I watched it. Okay. You predicted that in October.
Good to know. So right now, the Islamic Republic of Iran is super vulnerable. The Israelis could go back today or tomorrow and start bombing, and there's nothing they could do about it. And they've lost a lot of their missile production as well. The problem is the negotiation.
Why don't they? Why don't they?
Because Trump is reining them in. Because Trump, there are two things. They're saying to Trump, can we not get rid of this nuclear weapons program that Iran has, that you and others have said not to do? Why don't you do it? I'd love you to do it. You could do it. The Americans can do it in a way the Israelis can't. How? It's called B-2 bombers. Where are the B-2 bombers? About a half a dozen of them are in Diego Garcia. Where's Diego Garcia? It's in the Indian Ocean. It's a real short hop from there to Iran. What do they have to drop from the B-2s? Mops, not for your kitchen, but massive ordnance penetrators, which can dig very deep holes for the nuclear facilities. They're bunker busters. Way down, because you understand the Iranian regime is only building nuclear facilities for peaceful purposes. That's why they hide them under mountains. Because people might want to stop them from air conditioning kindergartens, so you got to have them under mountains. But it's for peaceful. They're building the missiles for peaceful purposes too. I'm not sure how you explain that exactly.
Yeah, peaceful,
including
missiles.
Intercontinental
I don't know what your
ballistic
problem
missiles.
is.
Including intercontinental ballistic missiles, not to deliver a nuclear warhead to Israel, because that's close. It's to deliver a warhead to targets anywhere in the world, which means the U.S. So the Israelis are saying, why don't you do that? And Trump is saying, let me see if I can negotiate a deal instead. I mean, I'm not saying I won't. I'm not saying I won't let you do it if I want you to do it, but let me see. Now, that's okay, except I'm worried of I am very worried of how these negotiations are going, and I fear we'll end up with JCPOA 2.0. Because the goal has got to be, the goal needs to be, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Cliff. You go ahead.
What's
the goal?
Has to be the verifiable dismantlement of the nuclear weapons facilities that they're building and no enrichment. It has to be like what we did with Libya, which we took the equipment away or the equipment is destroyed. It has to go. It can't just be putting it on ice a little bit and then next administration, they defrost it. It can't be like the JCPOA was, which said, delay it a little bit, but then we'll give you a peaceful pathway to being legitimately a nuclear weapons state. That's what Obama said. And Obama said, if we don't do that, it's war. And we can't fight a war against these guys because they're really powerful and they have all these proxies. What do you want of me? I am worried that Steve Witkoff is not sufficient, doesn't know as much as he needs to know about what happened before and this program. And he's got, he's supposed to be doing these negotiations, the Hamas-Israel negotiations, the Ukraine-Russia negotiations. My God, I think, Could Kissinger do all three at one time? I'm not sure any human being can do all three at one time.
The
So I'm
answer is
concerned.
no.
Well,
Okay.
and what are you doing trying to negotiate with genocidal maniacs? Like, this
Reasonable.
maybe, and you know what? This
By the way,
makes,
Cliff, let me introduce you to Ericka. Ericka, let me introduce you. Ericka doesn't candy coat anything. Go ahead, Ericka.
I mean, if their expressed goal is to murder Jews, what is even the point of being like, well, maybe you can have a nuclear bomb someday? Like, nah, bro, you can't. Nah. As long as your whole thing is about murdering the Jews, or and death to America, let's not forget, it's not just Israel that they want to wipe off the map. They hate us. So
Yeah.
why would you eat what
Yeah.
I
No, I
where do you even
100%
start from
agree.
negotiating?
Yeah, no, I agree that I think Witkoff perhaps thinks if I say, okay, we start with this, at the end of these negotiations we have again the dismantlement of your program. Then the Iranians say, well, then there's nothing to negotiate. We walk out and you do what you want to do, and he doesn't want to be in that situation. But that would be a reasonable. Don't forget, the Iranians have always said, and they said it, during the Obama administration, we won't meet with you directly. You are dreadful. You are satanic infidels. So we don't meet with you. Obama wanted to meet with the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. He said, no, I wouldn't meet. I don't meet with people like you. And they're still saying that. Oh, they've had some short meetings, mostly during the JCPOA period. We went through the Russians as if they're good brokers for this. We didn't understand who they were under Obama. Should have. And here we're using the Omanis. Not much. They're better, but even so, we should be saying you're going to negotiate directly with us, or we're not going to negotiate at all. And by the way, our aim here is the dismantlement of this. And if you don't want the dismantlement of this, tell us now, and we'll because we have another way to do this. Too many people don't understand the following: that they say, well, we want diplomacy, not coercion and force. No. It is coercion and force that makes diplomacy work. George Shultz knew that. He said, unless the shadow of power hangs over the negotiating table, you don't have serious diplomacy. They have to think. Yeah, go ahead.
There's always this. There's this section of people who believe that the Iranian people will rise up and overthrow the regime. Is that at all a possibility? I don't see it. I have plenty of Persian friends here who have fled Iran, and the stories that it is such an ironclad grip on society. And I know that the Iranian people, the Persian people are want freedom as much as anyone else. But is that really a possibility that there would be any sort of cultural uprising that would overthrow the theocracy?
Well, they have tried on numerous occasions. There have been uprisings, and under Obama, if you remember, there was a very serious uprising, and they went through the streets shouting, "Obama, are you with us or against us?" And he didn't answer because he was against them. He wanted to make a deal with the dictators, and they shouted, and they always do, "Death to the dictators! Death to the dictators!" They are sick and tired of having the religious class be the ruling class in their country forever. But you raise a good point, and the point is this: that the regime is brutal. I recently did an event with Reza Pahlavi, who is the Crown Prince of Iran. You know who I'm talking about. He's the son of the Shah, right? He's a very nice guy. A lot of Iranians would like to see him as the constitutional monarch if they could get rid of the current regime. And I told him, I said to him, look, I was in Iran in '79, and here's my impression. Your father could have stopped the revolution, but he'd have to have killed at least 10,000 of his people, of 10,000 Iranians, and he wasn't about to do that. And he said, you're exactly right. He was not about to kill 10,000 people. And the current regime, he said, they'll kill 10,000 people. But we, the Americans and others, should be supporting the pro-democracy, the anti-regime elements in the country to give them help. There's various things they need, whether it's communications, whether it's money for strikes. They could be helped to do it, but it's hard. A really repressive regime can keep the lid on the boiling pot for a very long time.
But here, here's where, and I agree 100% with what you're saying, but here's what I have a hard time with sort of those political calculations that we make as a country. No one thought that Hezbollah would fall as quickly as they did. The Berlin Wall was there, for seemingly forever, and it had vanished overnight. Right, the Soviet Union, with the great nemesis of the United States, was there for it was a dialectic battle of communism versus capitalism, disintegrates overnight, right? And that's what I think that people don't see, because until you defang the snake, right, and the head of the snake is Iran, and I would wager that if Israel strikes Iran, or if the United States strikes Iran, how quickly that regime falls, because I think the people would also rise up. And yes, the unfortunate part is that there would be a lot of death unnecessarily in the process, and I'm not advocating for that. On the other hand, as I talked about in the monologue, I mean, that's a traditional war, right? I mean, as long as you're not targeting civilians and you're targeting military, it's still street yard politics. It's still, if you want the bully to stop being the bully, you got to punch him in the nose.
Yeah. So you're right, and let's just dig down a little bit deeper on this. You just described two models for regime change. One is Hezbollah, and that came about purely kinetically. The Israelis implanted small amounts of explosives in walkie-talkies and beepers that they knew Hezbollah would wear, and they killed a lot of them all at once. And then they used bunker busters, several of them, and they knew where Hassan Nasrallah was, and they killed him. And then they have also gone after his successors one after another, so that they are almost without leadership. And then they have gone after the missiles, mostly in their silos, before they could be deployed. It's all kinetic. I mean, kinetic. I say they did it through acts of war that were very successful. Soviet Union was different. You had Gorbachev.
Of course.
Gorbachev was trying to reform the place, and it turned out to be impossible. And once you lifted the top of the pot a little bit, it began to boil over very, very quickly. And Xi Jinping has thought about this and talked about this, and he said, that's why you can't reform. That's why you can't do this. People will say, oh, please give us a little more freedom. No. You don't do what Gorbachev did. We learned a lesson from that. You keep the lid on the pot tight, because lift it this much and it's going to pop off and blow across the kitchen.
Well, I feel like we're hearing that from politicians here in America too, actually, with the whole Doge thing. I mean, even the likes of like Ben Shapiro are like, well, tariffs are bad and this is terrible. If we make any of these corrections, it's going to go bad. And it's like, well, at some point, bro, we're going to have to pull off the Band-Aid. And if we say that we are small government conservatives, that we want a fit federal government, and then you say, but reform is going to hurt. No. It's, well, so maintaining the status quo is better? No, that can't be better, in my opinion. And so what do you think, given that we have seen these uprisings, the Arab Spring, we've seen protests in China, given the fact that the governments are so brutal and so oppressive, like, what do you think it would actually take? You said, like, they were calling out to Obama.
Wait,
are we
talking
about like,
Iran?
sending troops? Yeah, Iran, China, any of these things. Like, are people talking about us sending troops over there to help free people? Like, what does that look like?
Well, I don't think we are. We're not talking about sending troops to Ukraine. We're just talking about letting them buy the weapons they need to defend themselves, which I think is a good thing. China is difficult because, it's possible that a war could break out over Taiwan, and I'm not even sure we'd win it. But I'm not sure the Chinese are going to do it that way anyhow. Or Xi Jinping is going to do it that way. There's other ways he could do it besides, an amphibious invasion and rockets and bombing. He can. I mean, imagine that he simply sends the Coast Guard and says, "We have to inspect all ships that go before they go into Taiwan, because after all, that's our territory, isn't it?"
Yeah.
And what do we do about
a naval blockade?
Well, a
Yeah,
quarantine
but
is.
like,
Let me just say, just to
Interesting.
be clear, a quarantine is a quarantine, and then there's a blockade. Blockade's an act of war. Quarantine isn't quite. So they could go all the way to blockade, but a quarantine, again, just Coast Guard insisting on inspecting vessels. That's a first step, and it's like saying, "What are you going to do about this?" You see what I mean? A blockade is going a long way, and
well, and
it
that's,
could
but
have been, so
that's
you
what I
got
mean.
quarantine, blockade, invasion, right? Those are three. And then you have all the cyber and other means you might be able to use to try to get them to essentially surrender, right? If you were to knock out all their financial system and all that.
Yeah.
Part of the problem is that I think Xi Jinping wants to take Taiwan whole, not destroyed, not least because the most advanced chips in the world are made in Taiwan.
Taiwanese.
Right.
And if you
But
end up,
so what do you think it would take for the people of China to rise up? That was what I was trying to get at. The
I
people
don't know
of
that
China, the people of Iran. Like, is that realistic for them to fight back against their government?
we can't have much impact on whether the Chinese rise up or not. That's not, here's what we should understand. The four powers I mentioned to you, this axis of aggressors, Moscow, Beijing, Pyongyang, Tehran, they are right now waging a Cold War against us. This Cold War has been going on for some time.
Yeah.
The historian Neil Ferguson identified it as that as early as, I think, 2018. We have to recognize that this is a new Cold War 2.0, and it's more challenging than the first Cold War, because the first Cold War was only against the Soviets, and they had a terrible little economy. They just had nuclear weapons, but 3 out of the 4 of this axis of aggressors have nuclear weapons, and the 4th is trying very hard to join the club. So we need to recognize that's the situation we're in, and that requires a lot of things. It requires quite a bit more defense spending. You want to spend a percentage of your GDP as you did during the first Cold War, and maybe more if you recognize that it's a more challenging Cold War. And you want to have allies, but you want your allies to contribute to the collective security. You want to mobilize for this. You want to understand what's at stake here, and you want to fight it and not make believe it's not going on. And that's a recognition we haven't quite come to yet, but maybe we're getting closer to it. But it's very challenging. And then you would like to see revolutions in these countries, absolutely. But you can't, I don't think you can count on that. Keep in mind that neither intelligence analysts, nor political scientists, nor astrologers predicted the Iranian Revolution, which was the Islamic Revolution of '79. They didn't predict they didn't predict the fall of the czars in 1917. Revolutions, it's kind of like volcanology. You can see a lot of smoke coming out of the volcano. You can hear and feel tremors. You don't know when the volcano is going to blow. It can happen.
So
we didn't know. Look, and by the way, no one predicted that Assad was going to fall in Syria the other day, and he did.
And in 2016, no one predicted Trump would be elected either, which was. But in the few minutes, sorry, I had to go there. In the few minutes we have left, I want to focus on the Middle East in one question and one question only. What happens to Gaza after Israel wins?
Okay, so interesting question.
We're going to have a beachfront resort, according to Trump. What are you talking about? Come on now.
It's
going to be the Palms.
It's very nice beach on the Mediterranean, not very different from the Côte d'Azur when you think about it. Doesn't need to be. First of all, just 2 points. One is, I think it is so unfair that people immediately after October 7th, after Israel's attack, said, well, what about the day after? What are the Israeli plans for the day after? What are you going to do there? Hey, it's not Israel's responsibility to think about what Gaza is going to look like, how it's going to be ruled after this war. That doesn't mean it's not a useful exercise for the Israelis to think about what they want from their own point of view. Israel first. What do you want to see there? And I think, but meanwhile, how aren't people saying, boy, the Arab League, they better get on the stick and figure out what they're going to do with Gaza after this war? How about the Organization of Islamic Cooperation? More than 50 countries. The Arab League is more than 20 countries. Shouldn't they be working on, hey, how do we do this? How do we rebuild? How do we clear the rubble? How do we
wait a minute. But if Israel is the victor, it then becomes what it has always been. It should have been Judea and Samaria, right? I mean,
Well, that's the West Bank. Now Gaza is different.
but wait, Samaria? No, one is West Bank, one is Gaza. One,
No,
right?
no, no,
I
no,
mean,
no. So the West Bank is Judea and Samaria. Okay, Gaza is Gaza, and there's ancient Jewish civilization Gaza. But keep in mind, Ariel Sharon pulled out unilaterally and said we don't have any interest. Now that again, the war has been fought, so it's different. The Israelis can decide what they want to do. I think most Israelis would say, yeah, I don't want to be responsible for 2 million Gazans. I don't want, I want somebody else to take responsibility for them, but I want them to do it in a way that's no threat to us, because if it is a threat to us, we're coming back in.
But what is a Gazan? What is a Gazan? You're talking about you're talking about people of Jordanian descent and Egyptian descent.
No, Gaza again on the West Bank. Okay, those are look. You have go back. You have Palestinian Arabs.
Right.
And you have Palestinian Jews, right? And in 1948, the Jewish population of Palestine, and they were the ones who were most often back then called Palestinians, Palestinian Post, Jewish newspaper, Palestinian Symphony, Jewish orchestra, okay? People said, come to Palestine. It meant come to a Jewish state. Palestinian meant Jewish until about 1964 when Arafat took the term. Okay, that's what he did. Okay, yeah, they were always I can show you posters of Palestine in Hebrew, Palestine. Okay, so and by the way, 2/3 of historic Palestine was made into what is now called the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan by the British. 2/3. Now. So, and that's part of this equation as well. Gaza again is Gaza, and once the Israelis pulled out, they pulled out every soldier, every farmer, every synagogue, every cemetery, everything. What was left? There were the Arabs of Gaza, and the Arabs of Gaza. Since in 2005, when the Israelis left, it was Fatah and there was Hamas, and in 2007, Hamas threw out Fatah, took full control. They have been a ward of the donor community. Things have not been bad in Gaza. If you see pictures now of what Gaza looked like on October 6th, 2023, it was a pretty nice place overall. I mean, not necessarily. There were villas on the ocean. There were malls. Read in the New York Times an op-ed by the mayor of Gaza City talking about the promenades, the libraries, the cultural centers, the theaters. They had a lot. And again, all social services were taken care of by the UN, particularly by UNRWA. They took care of education, took care of healthcare. World Food Organization came in. You can still, if you go on Twitter, there's a woman called Imshin, and she'll show you, here they are still today in Gaza, and they're making ice cream. Here today, right now. This does not look like a famine. Does not look like. Now, again, there are parts a lot of Gaza is rubble right now, but not
especially
all.
And after today, Rafah is
because everything was booby trapped, and the Israelis, they've done what they had to do because of what this is, and it all goes back to Hamas. Hamas, there was a ceasefire in place on October 6th, 2023, and that was broken by the invasion and by the massacre and by the pogrom, and Hamas could end this conflict tomorrow. All they would have to do is say, we are releasing the hostages. We're laying down our weapons. By the way, we'd like the Israelis to give us safe passage out to Algeria. Guess what? I guarantee you, the Israelis would say, okay, you got it. Okay.
Agreed. And I have to stop you there because we're up against the hour. Ericka, come back in if you can. So, Cliff, my head explodes when I talk to you, but in the best of ways. I just
good.
It's just in the best of ways. But look, ladies and gentlemen, we've been speaking with the president and founder of Foundation for Defense of Democracy, FDD. Cliff, where can they find you?
FDD.org. Everything we do, everything we produce is there. FDD.org. They'll find there too. I have a weekly column. My weekly columns are called Foreign Desk for the Washington Times. Appear in other places, but every Wednesday in the Washington Times. Posted. One is just posted tonight. In fact, on the Washington Times website. And by the way, I've got my own little podcast called Foreign Policy. Kind of a dad
There
joke.
you go. Yeah.
And we talk about all these wonky things.
So, and social media, where can they find you on?
I'm on Twitter. I don't do a lot beyond Twitter. It's just too much, but I am on Twitter.
Yes.
And what's the handle? There's FDD.
At Clifford. I think there's at FDD for sure, and there's at Clifford. I think at Clifford D. May. I forget, but they should be able to find me there.
All right. Well,
all right.
With that,
there's the FDD on Twitter.
There's
and
the,
definitely
got it
go
up.
check him out.
Thank you,
check out
Ericka.
Cliff himself. You are very welcome. Happy to do it, you guys. We thank you for being here with us this evening. I was actually so fascinated listening. I completely forgot to take a second commercial break. So
I wasn't going to call you out on that, but that's okay.
We'll probably run that before the credits, you guys, just to say thank you to our sponsor, American Center for Education and Knowledge. But again, you have been listening to Mr. Cliff May. Go check out the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Donate, buy merch, support, do all the things. And if you've been watching this long and you've gotten something out of the video, make sure to like and subscribe to on whatever platform you're watching. We love Twitter and Rumble because those are the free speech platforms. So that's where we encourage you to go check it out. Make sure to share with your friends. If you didn't get anything out of this video, we thank you for hate watching because all of it feeds the algorithm. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you all next week. Bye.
America came into being based on a shared belief and a common set of values. Unlike other nations that were bound together based on common ancestry, race, or caste, we came into being based on a simple and shared set of ideals. That the power of government is based on the consent of the governed. That life, the freedom to live life on our own terms in our own way, free from government interference, and liberty, our most precious value, and the pursuit of happiness, which means we are free to pursue that which we choose, with the knowledge and courage to know that nothing is guaranteed to us in this life. Those values, America was founded on these basic inalienable rights. Freedom to pray to God in our own way. Freedom to think and speak freely without fear of punishment or harm. And freedom to gather in our places of worship and in our local taverns. And freedom to defend ourselves, our families, our homes, and our neighbors as we see fit. The American Center for Education and Knowledge is dedicated to protecting American exceptionalism anywhere and everywhere it is threatened. ASIC is a 501c3 and depends on your tax-deductible donations. Please help us continue our